First off, man, we're big fans of Dalhaus over here ever since we first found Love It, and then
Hmm.
now the EP's been out, and we've been having that on loop. We were just curious,
Hmm.
what's the origin of the Dollhouse project? Like, how did you come up with the name?
It's funny. It like actually just popped out of me from a textbook that I was reading in college. It was like the last name of some. I think it's like a musicologist or something. But I just like saw it when I was reading, and I was like, oh, there we go. That's it. I think I changed the spelling a little bit.
Yeah, it
Uh,
always makes you
but
think of like Bauhaus or like the words dollhouse,
hmm.
Yeah, or like an actual dollhouse.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Funny.
Yeah, it makes sense, man. What does your music making process look like? Do you lean towards hardware or software? What DAW?
I'm like a Logic guy. Definitely always have been. And I'm just like a huge software head. I like tried so many times to like get myself like all this like gear and stuff, but I just love like the ability with just being all in the box to just sort of like swap everything and sort of move in and out. And I feel like there's definitely something cool about like the finality of working with hardware, working with audio and that kind of thing. But like all my music is like I think every part of it is so alive the whole time I'm making it, and I'm changing it so much as I'm going, and like the flexibility of just like always working with software just feels so natural to me. That's just kind of like
No, I get you there, man. Like, I'm super into like hardware gear. Like, I have like a Prophet, I have like the new like
mhm.
TO5, like a Mini Freak. Uh, I'm super into hardware, but that freedom with software to just go and edit anything in post and it's not just baked into the sound is like so nice and unrivaled. And I started with software too,
Yeah,
so
totally. I also think I think some music people are big like tinkerers, you know, and they're really into like a new tool, and there's something like really exciting about like, oh, I have this new thing and it can do all this stuff. But like for me, like if when I'm in the zone and I'm kind of like in the process of making music, like sitting down to sort of like figure out how this like new machine that I just bought works is like a more of a hindrance to the process for me than it is like an exciting new opportunity. And like I get that feeling of just like having a bunch of new sounds and sort of like having all this stuff to like work with and stuff. So I'll do days where I'm just like, doing like a week of like sound design only and like building a huge template and like working off of that so that I can just kind of like get in there and go. Cause I actually like, it's like the opposite. Like if I'm like sitting down, like, oh, like how does this thing, like I gotta get in here. And like, it's just like I'll lose that like special lightning bolt moment, you know?
yeah. I feel like if you're in that flow state, you really want to just minimize the number of distractions.
Exactly. And I've always felt like when I really make something where I was like flowing super well, it's like at the end of it, I'm like, who made this?
Yeah,
Like, where
yeah,
did this even come from? You know what I mean?
yeah. You just
I
like
have like
wake up.
amnesia.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So
Like in terms of creativity during the day, do you think you're more of like a morning or evening person?
I'm like a morning guy. Like if the best stuff that I'll make is like get right out of bed and go.
A word.
I mean, I can do it. Like if I'm really into it, I can do it, forever. But I've never been like in, especially like sessions too, like nighttime sessions. I'm just like, oh, like I'd so much rather just like daytime, daylight. I mean, that's why I like. I don't know. One of the reasons I'm out in LA, it's like David Lynch said it the best, but the light out here, there's just something about it, and like just like waking up and like leaving the windows open. Like I'll often like just like as much as my neighbors hate it, just like leave all the windows open in the studio and just like hearing the birds and shit. It's just like
Totally.
Hey, man, it
peace
sounds like the
actually.
neighbors are getting to hear that unreleased stuff, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, shifting focus specifically to the Dollhouse EP, like, we love the cohesive sound of the whole project. Are there any, like, specific plugins or pieces of gear you used on the record that, like, you want to shout out or mention or anything?
Mhm. Well, a lot of the Dollhouse EP stuff, I was like leaning super hard into silent. just because it's kind of fun, like sort of
Yeah, yeah.
fossilized piece of software, where like it hasn't really been updated in a while, and like it's got this like really sort of dated and cool sound that so it's just sort of like ready to go because I think like most of the stuff you're working with and like a lot of those presets are from like 2008 2009 and they're just like right there, and I think Steve Aoki like made a lot of them, so they have like a lot of this kind of like fidget house vibe, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's like a new fun thing that I've been enjoying is like trying to find like almost like a new version of like crate digging for records, of finding sort of like weird fossilized pieces of software like on the
Sure.
internet. And you can find like Reason is a really cool one because they
Yeah,
make all
yeah,
these like
yeah.
Reason packs that are on these forums that are buried like deep in the internet that are from like the mid 2000s, and if you like just can like find this stuff and like you can like repair it and like unzip it properly and get it all working, you have these like just like little time
Sounds of the
capsules of, like,
times.
yeah, totally, which is kind of fun, but a lot of time you open it and it's like all corrupted and shit, so
For sure. Those older defunct and like niche sounds definitely contribute to the overall uniqueness of your sound.
yeah, I stick to like what I'm familiar with. I mean, like I always use Serum, and I get a lot of like effects plugins that are kind of like new and weird. Like I've been using this one called Rift by Minimal Audio a lot, which is like a distortion shaper, which is pretty cool. And like I use this one called Infiltrator Devious Machines, which is just like a crazy way to like just stack a million different effects on something, and then I'll like use that to just kind of like chop a bunch of little pieces up and go in between them. So it's kind of fun.
Totally. Yeah.
And then I've also been playing around with some of that shit that Justice was doing in their mix with the Masters. I don't know if you guys watched that, but like they did some crazy stuff with Melodyne that is I've been playing around with, and it's been so fun.
Yeah,
Just weird. I don't know how they. I guess when you have 6 years in between making a record, you can really fool around with like every single possible piece of sound.
for sure.
But
Yeah, dude. I mean, I love Justice, man. They're such a, like a generational duo. Like I've seen clips of them talking from that mix with the Masters,
Mhm.
but I don't think I've seen what they do with Melodyne.
It's great. I just like I'm like, how did you guys fucking even think to do this? It's ridiculous, but it's so cool. Anyway.
Yeah, like about the sound of your self-titled work. Did you play all the guitars within the record?
No, all the guitars I work with, I make are it's like all programmed.
For real? I mean, like based on hearing them, I wouldn't
Yeah,
have guessed.
and I just like, well, I mean, I feel like that's like one of my like favorite things to do. I'll just tinker and tinker and tinker and tinker with it and like layer and layer and layer and layer and like till I can sort of like sculpt this like fake guitar sound that's like pretty convincing.
Yeah, man. I mean, we were totally convinced.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't play any instruments at all, but that's just like part of
Yeah, for sure.
the.
That's like a true laptop warrior, man.
It's all about the laptop for me. I'm a purist.
I mean, having all the gear in the fully kitted out studio is great, but there's just something to be said about pulling up anywhere with the laptop and just
Yeah,
working.
it's fun. I know. I mean, that's like I've always had this fantasy about having like this like super pimped out, beautiful like control room space studio, but then just having like a little laptop and like a trackpad and like 2 speakers just like sitting in an empty room. Something about that would just be like so cool.
So we love the sound of the EP.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, but we know it's not your debut project.
No.
Obviously, if we go through your Spotify, we can see that the Dollhouse EP is not your first piece of work, and we're
Yeah.
curious about that 2020 EP titled Corrida. What was the story behind it? How did that shift happen?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so like I was just making like really I was like really into ambient noise music and sort of like self-scoring, and like I had made that project which is like it's like about bullfighting basically, and like every track on it like corresponds to like the 4 stages of like a traditional bullfight and what happens in them. And that like I don't know, it was like I loved the process of making that kind of music, and like you build it linearly and like every step of it is like just like it would take me like a day to make 30 seconds of music for like that album. But Um, and that was like a fun way for me to experiment. Like I had written a lot of the stuff out like by hand, like in staff, and that was like a new process for me. But like I don't know, like that kind of music, I feel like everybody who like listens to that kind of stuff also makes it. You know what I mean? It's
Totally.
pretty
Yeah.
insular
Yeah.
crew, and I really enjoyed it, and like I was really proud of it. But I was also just like, sometimes you just want to make something that's like you can put it on. Like I don't know, I have this new test now where it's like I just like if I can play it and I can play for like the homies and everybody gets it and like you can play it at the club and it's cool, but like I can also play it for like my mom's friend Peggy and she's like, wow, this is great, it's fun. I'm like, there you go, you know what I mean?
Yeah, taste test.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you don't want to just make music that's only appreciated by other musicians.
Yeah, and it was fun. Like it's like I don't know, it was fun to make, and like I still love that kind of stuff. But there's something almost like masturbatory about it. Like it's like sound explosion. But I still think like some of the new stuff that I'm making, there's like a little bit more of that sort of brought back into it.
For sure.
Okay.
And you'll probably hear that when it comes out. There's sort of like maybe a middle ground between the new stuff and
Dude, yeah, that's exciting to hear for sure, man. Can't wait to hear how you fuse the two sounds. Maybe we'll hear some new Dollhouse soon.
It's coming soon. It's coming soon. Yeah.
Fuck yeah, man.
Oh yeah, dude, stoked.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff coming up. But
Yeah, man, I heard the snippet you posted the other day and I was like, yeah, I need this to drop. But like for the EP, were there any specific artists or pieces of work that you were listening to as inspiration?
I think so. I mean, there's like things that are always just gonna be like I'm always gonna go back to. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge like Brian Eno acolyte, and I feel like he's always kind of taken me to school in my head, And one of my favorite, I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Killing Joke. That's like one of my favorite bands ever, and like I'm always like sort of fascinated by their sound. Like it's really cool. They're like this like industrial rock band from the late '70s, early '80s, but like they sort of they were like working with synths and stuff in a post rock way, but like or in a like in a post punk way, but sort of like before like in the '80s when they had sort of like decided what that was going to sound like when you used like when you made super synth heavy rock, and like there's this sort of like dry like rawness to the way they work with these like really crispy and like cutting and sort of deep synths, and they're more like I think when you listen to like especially a lot of stuff in the '80s and a lot of stuff now, I feel like people think of like adding synthesizers to your music, like whether it's dance music or like rock or like whatever you're doing, like it's a keyboard, but I think like what's cool about them is like it feels like it's actually like the lead guitar as far as like part of like the sound goes, and that was like super inspiring to me, at least for this Dalhaus EP, but kind of always listening to that stuff. So yeah.
What was the band's name again?
The Killing Joke. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. That's awesome.
As for performing, I know I've seen your name pop up on a couple show posters. Yeah, I was just wondering if you like DJ, do you live sets?
Just been DJing. I mean, there's definitely some live stuff like I think I want to do. I like one of the sort of like under maybe secret influences on the Dalhaus EP is like Miami booty bass. I don't know if you guys can really pick up on that, but like that's sort of how the music is like constructed. It's not like verse chorus. It's just like these like little like snippets of almost like little sonnets or whatever, and like that's sort of like the inspiration from that comes from like DJ Assault basically, and like that kind of stuff. So I think if I did a live set at the moment now, it would be something like his, where I'm DJing but I'm like popping up and sort of like walking out, walking back. I don't think I would do like a full like karaoke set or whatever.
Yeah, for sure, man. That makes sense. Thinking about your music and like the arrangement of it, it wouldn't make sense to do like a full karaoke sing along, given how a lot of the vocal passages are kind of recycled and used and kind of glitched up throughout like the whole track. They're like more part of the soundscape as an instrument
Mm-hmm.
than like a full vocal part, right? So then I don't love
Mm-hmm.
it. It kind of does this like it samples like the Google Translate voice vocal
It's just
sample.
like, yeah, like just some random sort of flip sample-y vocal stuff. And
Okay, but the rest of the songs are just you.
yeah, yeah, everything else is me on that whole tape. Yeah.
Okay, sick. Yeah,
And that
yeah.
was something that I didn't expect I was going to do. Like when I sat down to make it, Love It was the first track that I made. And then on that EP, at least that's on the EP. And then
Oh, okay. Okay.
after that, I was like working on Sticky Bomb, and I had just kind of made it. And I was like, I don't know anyone whose vocals I would want on this. And then I sort of just like had this like line pop in my head, and I did it. And I was like, all right, it works. Like, it could just be me.
It definitely works.
So that was that. And then I just kind of went on all the rest of them.
Wait, so originally you were planning on getting other vocalists to sing on all of them?
Yeah, at the beginning, that's what I was gonna do. Like, I was just
Wow.
gonna kind of like make beats and just like have people I know come in. And then I just realized like it'd be so much more fun. I have so much more control if it was me. And I felt as soon as I felt like I could, then I was just like, let's do that.
Yeah, that's crazy, man, because we really love how you did like the vocals yourself.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, I feel like your approach to the vocals and how they worked into the tracks is really what gives the EP identity. It makes it like more memorable.
Yeah, and I do. I don't know like what I can really talk about, but there's like stuff that I'm working on with other people right now, which has been pretty fun. And
Ooh, okay.
yeah, definitely. That's always like something that I'm really interested in. And I mean, outside of sort of Dollhouse stuff, like I also have like, pop, like a sort of life in pop music. And like I'm like,
Okay, all right.
I do like a lot of recording with Sia, and I've like worked with her for a while, and like
Sia?
got to do like a little sort of production on her last album, which was kind of fun. And like I've always had this like love of just like big industry pop music, and like that's something that like no matter what I'm doing, like even when I was making like the craziest stuff, like on that Korean album, I was also just like making like total dance pop, just like fully produced like pop instrumentals on the side, and just always love that kind of thing. So it's like a fun exercise for me.
Wait, man. So you're telling me you've worked with Sia? That's like super sick, man. But outside of just listening to music, like for creating, like what do you got going on in the rotation? Like, what have you been listening to on loop when you drive, going out, anything like that?
What am I listening to right now? I don't know. I'm like kind of dabbling into stuff that I was loving when I was like 14 years old. So like I've been really getting back into like Spooky Black right now, which has been so good. And I've been listening to this band. Like I don't know if it's like if they're like a group or if it's like one person. I don't know if you've ever checked out Evenings, but it's like this really like stripped down sort of like mellow, washy, instrumental sort of. It's like kind of Clams Casino-esque and definitely part of that era. And I'm loving like that kind of stuff right now. I'm always listening to that. I'm always listening, to like, post-punk, Killing Joke kind of stuff. Like Television's probably my favorite band of all time. Marquee Moon, that's probably my favorite album of all time. That's always like something.
Some music definitely has its moments of obsession, right?
Exactly.
And then there's others that are just like old reliables.
I think when I really don't know what to put on, like if I'm in my car and I'm just like, I don't know, whatever, let's just go back to it. I feel like I probably listened to Moon Safari like over 3,000 times, like the Air album. That's like for me. Always listen to that. Always listening to Bowery Electric.
Okay.
And I love all that trip hop stuff so much. That's like a huge constant influence for me. And like Portishead and Massive
full range
stuff. Yeah, just love it.
Totally. Okay, sorry. Going back to the Sia thing, I got a quick question. I'm sure you can't talk about the extent of y'all's work in full detail, but if you don't mind us asking, like, how did that even like come about? Did you like message her? Or, like what?
I work with this guy Jesse Shakin, who's sort of been a mentor for me, and I just like he's like he produced Chandelier, and like he's worked with Sia forever, so like I'm started working with her through him, and
Okay.
still doing stuff with him. But yeah, it was just all came through that. It wasn't like, hey, what's up? let's
Hey, see you
let's
tap in.
connect.
Yeah. A cold call in the DMs. Hit my line. We got to
Heard
build.
you love French electro.
Hit her with the Silicon Valley Gary V type stuff.
Yeah, so like, dude, that's sick. First of all, but so that's cool. Like, you worked with Sia. Do you have like other like dream collaborations? Like, if you could work with anyone, dead or alive?
Dead or alive? Oof, that's a good question. I mean, all those guys, like, Justice, Sebastian, like, those guys are just like gods to me, It would just be unbelievable.
Dude, a Dalhaus Sebastian collab would genuinely be insane. Like, I need to hear that, like, now, dude.
But I love, like, I don't know, like, I really love Block Party, and, like, I love his voice, and,
Okay, yeah.
stuff like that would be so cool.
So, what does life look like for Dollhouse outside of making solo music or working in the studio? Do you have any like other hobbies, passion projects, or are there like artistic mediums you like working in?
I mean, I used to like, before I was making music, I was like all kind of visual art all the
Oh,
time,
sick.
and like that was what I was gonna do, and that's still something that like maybe it's just like private and just for me, but it's something that I still try to do as much as I can,
For sure.
and
Yeah.
definitely love to do more of. But yeah, besides that, just like hanging out with my new cat.
Yeah, good times.
And, just like enjoying what LA's got going on out here. It's like a really funny place, and there's always something weird going on.
Yeah. So like with visuals, then like, do you usually like make music first and then think about the visuals after?
I'm always like, I think I don't know why, I don't know what it is, but like I'm always sort of seeing whether it's like sort of maybe just color and shapes and just imagery, like while I'm making music. That's like a big thing for me, and also part of why like I'm not like a huge concert guy. Like I never really like going to live shows because I feel like my relationship with music is like these like really crazy visual associations with it that I make in my own head, and then when I sort of like break it up, it gets all weird. So like, yeah, part of what I'm doing when I'm making and I'm getting the idea for something, like I'll first start by just sort of like assembling all this like sort of visual inspiration, and like while I'm making it, I'm also sort of like doing that kind of thing, and like whether it's thinking about something like literally like cover art, but like aside from that, even just sort of like just like randomly going on crazy internet deep dives and finding like weird videos that sort of like feel like what I'm trying to make in my head, and
Totally.
definitely informs everything sort of.
Yeah, so you primarily have experience doing like digital art that you make on a computer. Is that kind of it, or do you work with physical art?
Yeah, or just like sort of just the stuff that I make, it's both. And like I used to be like a big sculpture guy,
For sure.
but yeah, just sort of like digital art on my computer and just that kind of thing. Maybe no one will ever see it. Maybe it's just for us. Maybe one day.
Maybe there's some sort of like mixed visual audio performance art piece waiting to be made there.
Exactly. I mean, that would be cool. I had a thought with like when I was working on that first project, that Korea project, of like maybe doing some sound art stuff, but
yeah, I feel like that would have been pretty cool to see like an abstract visual component paired with like the Korea project or something,
Pretty tight.
What about like music videos or like visualizers? Are those kind of, you thinking about those?
I mean, I think like there's definitely a whole Dollhouse visual world that could emerge, that could just keep going. You know what I mean?
For
And
sure.
like whatever resources and like whatever I keep doing, like I could make it as big as it could just go forever.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. I mean, like, since you have a fair amount of experience in like working in the industry as both a solo artist and like running sessions for others, something that you seem to just be doing with, I guess, Sia. Do you have any advice for up and coming like musicians? Anything you want to share with them?
I mean, maybe it's cliche, but I just think you gotta just make music all the time. Like you gotta just live and breathe it. And like, I think like, at least personally for me, like, I think like letting yourself give in to like writer's block can be kind of a trap. Like I think if you just, it's always been true for me that like even if I'm like I don't want to make anything today, I don't have any ideas. Like I love doing it. So like if I sit down to work and I just like force myself to be there, like something's gonna come out, and like it will be. So like you just got to give yourself the space to do it and just make it all the time. And like I think like especially when you're not making a lot of stuff constantly, it forces you to get really attached to things, and they're like really precious, and like because you've only made one thing in the past week, and so it's like really got to stick. But like if you're just constantly turning stuff out, like there's a lot of tracks. Like I mean, what it's like a 5-track EP, and there's a lot of stuff that's not in there, and I don't think will ever be released. But sometimes I feel like you just got to get like the bad ideas out first, and like that's when something really cool emerges. And like you can't do that if you're not making anything. So you just got to constantly work, I think.
So there's a Dollhouse hard drive full of unreleased stuff. Yeah. Well, I think you made a really good point there about like, the more you make, the less attached you are to it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I just think like it puts part of it for everybody. It's like making terrible shit. And like you gotta be okay with that. And you gotta be able to like hear your stuff that you don't like, and like you gotta be okay abandoning it. But in order to do that, you also have to have new stuff coming all the time. That has to be good. And like you have to trust that like in any given moment, I think like, yeah, also something awesome. Like you'll be able to make something cool tomorrow. So
Oh, totally.
Yeah, you just got to put the time in.
yeah, just time. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely easy to fall into that, like, I'm not inspired today. I don't want to waste my time chipping away at it if it's not going to be like good or if it's going to be a slog the whole time.
Yeah, and like definitely the days where I'm like, I really don't want to do it. I feel like the stuff that I make on those days is not gonna. I mean, maybe sometimes, but it's not gonna be better. But I also just feel like even if like you make a whole thing and the whole thing sucks or whatever, and there's just like one, like little like synth riff in it that's cool, then like it wasn't a bust because you can just take that. Like there'll be so many times where I'm like fooling around with something forever and I have like a whole track almost finished, and I realized like actually the only thing that's working about it is like the snare or something. You know what I mean? And like I'll just take that and like just start again, and then the next thing that I make with that, like that was the one, and like that is definitely
sometimes all it's worth keeping are like the minute details.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just like
toes.
scrapping the rest and starting over.
Yeah.
Well, man, we're getting towards the end of the interview here, but like we have a couple more questions for you, right? So like for one, this is something that I think we want to ask anyone that we talk to is just like, what do you think is the biggest problem or issue in the music industry going on right now, or like perpetuated or blown out of proportion, or?
I mean, I try to be open-minded. Like, I think it's always like, you can always, like people are like, man, it's like so brutal, release music now. And like, I just think the reality is like whatever your time is, that's just gonna like be your time. And there's always gonna be like tools that you can use to succeed. And there's always gonna be like things that fucking suck. And, you can't really like I feel like one of the biggest things I hear people talk about is like how hard it is to sort of like or like there's so much. It's so easy for you to upload your music, but also like the amount of people that actually like can break through and like make something that connects with people is pretty small. But I also feel like, I mean, I don't know if this is true, maybe this is just like a vibe or a gut feeling, but I've always kind of felt like that number is pretty similar to the number of people that were like able to like get things together, like get a band into a studio, pay a engineer, pay a producer, get like a record distributor to print a certain amount of vinyl. Like I feel like that number of sort of like, I don't know, like I don't know if the ratio has really actually like changed that much. I just think it feels like it has because there's so much more music easily accessible that hasn't broken through. But I actually just feel like it's sort of always been just as hard. So I think like there's just, like I don't know if I'd ever be able to make music if it hadn't been for like all these like new tools and technologies in this moment. And I just try to like keep an open mind to whatever. Like, I mean, even things like TikTok, like you like curse TikTok and like, I don't want to, have my own thoughts about it, but it's just like, that's just like a new weird tool. And like, whatever it is, I don't know if it's good or bad. It just is like, it is. Like it's so bizarre. Yeah, it's like whatever. Now there's this social media and it's like music based, and like whether that's good or bad, it's a lot of change, but that's just like another thing to just sort of like think about,
Yeah.
explore, work
Yeah.
with or don't work with, and it's just like kind of our landscape now. So I just
Totally.
try to like kind of be open minded if I can, and like I think you can get really caught up in like I don't know, like there's I remember seeing this like web comic back in the day that was like this guy being like looking at his art and be like, I'll never be as good as the old masters. And then it's like some impressionist in the 20s and he's like, I'll never be as good as the old masters. And then it's like he's thinking about like whatever, and then it gets to like a caveman looking at a rock wall and he's like, I'm the fucking best.
No, totally. Yeah, like I'm the dopest one, you know.
No, that's real though, because I feel like people can always look through the past with rose-colored glasses
Yeah, exactly.
because we didn't live through that time, right? There's always like pros and cons about like what's going on, and it's super easy to just be like, I used to be better in like the good old days or whatever, but you didn't actually like deal with the negatives or anything about it back then. Just looking at the positives retroactively.
Yeah, don't you see? And always like I don't know, like I mean, the reality is, and like and it's worth talking about too, because like at the end of the day, like so much of like whatever this, like I hear a lot of people like talk shade about, I mean, whatever you want to call this moment of like electro clash revival, sort of like I mean, I don't like the term indie sleaze, but like that kind of thing, like. And just in general, sort of like a Zoomer revivalism in music. Like, I think, I don't know, I try to see it like not that it's, maybe, I mean, I guess like you sort of look at the future and there's always this like fear and anxiety or whatever. And then there's always like reassurance in the past, no matter what it is. Like the past is always comforting because you always know that it worked out in the end. And like there's always these things that feel new and confusing and weird. And it's like, okay, like something like TikTok, like whatever, like does that mean like no one's ever going to be able to do this again because they have to do this, and like there's all these questions, and then in the past they always have answers, but like I'm sure it was just as weird and confusing to be like uploading music when Napster had just come out,
Oh
and
man,
like it's just like what the
Napster.
fuck, what's going to happen, blah blah, and like now we know what happened and it was like fine or whatever, and you look back and then you can just sort of like romanticize that era, and it's like, oh, it was so simple, but it's always complicated and crazy and strange and like totally unknown. And I just try to like embrace that and take what I can. And I don't know.
The quirks and the weird issues are almost like what end up defining that era, you know? Like you bringing up Napster reminds you of like people downloading songs off of like LimeWire
Yeah.
back in that era, and then they're actually just like downloading Soulja Boy songs disguised as like top 40s with like the
Right,
metadata.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the things like I mentioned him earlier, but like Brian, talks about how like I can't remember the exact quote, but he talks about how like everything that you used, all the technologies that we use to sort of like capture like our time in our moment to the best of our ability, like the limitation of those technologies like becomes the thing that defines the era, and then becomes a character. And like I think that's really interesting. Like, like for example, like this stuff is like all like when you're looking back at that like late 2000s electro clash era, like it's all these like pushing like these new sort of like generations of their DAWs to the limit, but also like not quite what's possible in Ableton today or whatever. And then you try to like kind of walk it back to that, and it can be just like a fun way to play or whatever. But even it applies to like a flip phone or a digital camera. It's like like a whatever Nikon Coolpix is like the best tiny cool camera you can fit in your pocket at the time, and everyone was like, "Oh, these photos are crisp and cool," and now it's like cool, horrible, shitty, and like dope way, and like that's just kind of the thing. So
And then enough time passes and the next generation gets nostalgic of that
yeah,
era
exactly.
and they want to relive
And
it.
so I also like have fun trying to think about like what those things are now. Like I wonder about like how like dope and aesthetic like the mangled seven figured hands in like shitty mid journey like you know, that's gonna be like pixel art. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's just terrifying, dog.
Remember when they couldn't fucking make somebody eating spaghetti and it was just like coming out of their ears and shit? Like, wow, what a vibe. So
Yeah.
2020.
Oh man, yeah, like how that terrifying demented AI shit is gonna be looked
Yeah.
back on. Yeah, for sure. Hey man, well that's the end of our questions. Thank you so much again for
Yeah, I
talking
had a
to
great
us.
time, man.
Is there anything you want to leave the people with before we're done? Anything coming up for Dollhouse?
I mean, just, you know, yeah, keep watching. There's some cool stuff about to come, and it's gonna be fun. I'm excited.
Totally. Maybe new Dollhouse releases soon.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us, man. You know, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Good luck with everything, man.
Take it easy, y'all.